Well, hello and welcome to Beaver Dome Books. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's book talk. Before we begin, I want to mention a couple of our many upcoming events. Tomorrow night at 6:30, we have Jarrett DePere. He's going to share his graphic novel, Wait Now in the Fire. And then next week, February 11th, we have Adele Parks, all the way here from the United Kingdom. And she's going to be sharing her book, Our Beautiful Mess. And she'll be in conversation with Heather Gudenkopf, and that will be at the Franklin Events Center, also at 6:30. And you can find all the details about this on our website, or you could pick up a list of upcoming events at the register. Now, onto the program. This book is timely, accessible, inspiring, and rigorous. Fair Game presents a sports landscape beyond any current conceptions, a world changed by unrestricted and joyful movement in sports. Ellie Roscher is the author of Fair Game, Remarkable Rose, The Embodied Path, 12 Tiny Things, Play Like a Girl, and How Coffee Saved My Life. I need to read that one.
That's a good one.
And the host of the Unlikely Conversations podcast. She teaches writing and yoga in Minneapolis. Her writing can be found in the Baltimore Review, Inscape Magazine, and elsewhere. She edits the Keeping the Faith series, Keeping the Faith in Seminary, Keeping Faith in Rabbis, and Keeping the Faith in Education. Ellie holds a master's degree in theology, urban ministry from Luther Seminary, and an MFA in creative nonfiction writing from Sarah Lawrence College, and she is a certified yoga teacher. She will be joined in conversation by Shannon Evans, and Shannon is the author of The Mystics Would Like a Word, Feminist Prayers for My Daughter, Rewilding Motherhood, Luminous, and Embracing Weakness. And she is the spirituality and culture editor at the National Catholic Reporter. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
And I'll hand it over to you two.
Good about how coffee saved my life. I know, right? It's an oldie but a goodie. Continues. Okay. Continues to save my life. Shoot.
It's why you might want to hook it to your waistband.
Cool. Ellie, yes. We have been friends for a while, and I remember when this book was taking root in your heart and brain and a lot of hours of your day and week. Can you explain how a book on trans athletes came across your desk as a cis woman?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, where do we start? My entry point into the conversation is from when I was teaching high school, and I had some trans students. And so my first trans student was named Mark, and I met him, and he introduced himself as Mark before I took attendance, and his name was something else on my attendance sheet. And so he was really, really dear to me, and at that point in his life, his parents weren't supportive of his transition, and so I was one of the adults that really advocated for him within the school. That was years before all of these bans against trans athletes happened, and so that is one of my entry points into the topic. If we want to go way back to my childhood, I was raised by feminist Catholic nuns who taught me that when a policy comes down, you have to use your peripheral vision to see how are the most vulnerable people in society going to be affected by that policy. And so when these policies about trans athletes started coming down, and I knew some of my trans students were the most vulnerable students in the school, some of the most vulnerable, I looked at the policies through their lens. And you know, I started gymnastics when I was 4, and so I have no memory of a life when I wasn't doing sports and I wasn't playing and embodied. And so I really believe in sports as one way for kids to belong, and for kids to be in their bodies. And then adults are just grown kids, right? And so really the seeds were planted in my childhood as an athlete, and as someone who's constantly thinking about social justice and then these particular trans students that I met and fell for. But then professionally, my previous book, The Embodied Path, I interview people who have interesting body stories. And I was looking to explore how we tell the stories of our bodies and how that might shift our relationship to our own body, but then also, if we share those stories, how that might shift society's compassion toward bodies. And Dr. Anna Baith was one of my sensitivity readers. We had met when she lived in Minneapolis, and we hit it off right away on a gender equity panel when I was talking about my second book. And we became friends, and when she read The Embodied Path, a light bulb went off for her. She was doing the leading research on this as a sports sociologist, but her data and her research wasn't changing anybody's mind on the topic. And she was really drawn to the narratives of these body stories and thought, what if we teamed together and explored both the head and the heart of this issue. And we knew we were onto something right away. We put a call out to anyone who identifies as trans and as an athlete, having no idea what would happen, and we just got a flood of folks who were interested in being interviewed. And the project has become a passion project of mine, where I just really did get to sit at the feet of trans athletes and say, what is it like to be in your body? What is it like to navigate this cis sporting world? And I learned a lot about myself and a lot about how I can advocate for them as a cis person who loves sports. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing that I really love about this book is the trans athletes' voices and stories, and I do. It strikes me how seldom those are included in media coverage of this topic, and a lot of the fear mongering that we hear about it. Are there themes that come across? I mean, well, let's see. What ages did you interview? Like, what was his youngest, oldest?
Yeah, I think that's one of the really special things about this book. The youngest athlete was 8. And the oldest is 59. So the interviews were now a few years ago, but having that range was so fascinating for so many different reasons. You can kind of see how society has evolved by how folks tell their coming out stories. So some of these athletes in their 50s, had a childhood where they would say, I sensed something was different in me, but I didn't know what. I didn't know what to call it. I thought the difference felt dangerous. And then, there are multiple older trans athletes who talked about seeing a talk show, like the Maury Povich show or something like where there was like a transvestite on there, and being like, that was the closest they had to resonance of like, okay, so there's something here, but that still feels dangerous, so I don't know what to do with that, right? That's so different than some of these young kids that we interviewed. And one of the things I noticed about the kids is how deeply it matters what state they live in. We don't have a federal sporting system. And so really it does fall down to state by state. And so we, for example, interviewed a power lifter who's a trans boy, and he wants to be competing in the boy category. And because he lives in a state that goes by their birth certificate, he is competing in the girl category and winning and feeling very uncomfortable about that, versus an athlete that lives in a state that's extremely supportive of trans athletes, and what an amazing experience she's having, feeling advocated for by her teammates, but then also the parents of the teammates and the coaches, and that the mom had done all of this work to kind of go to the high school and ask permission, and it was easeful. And so the difference that these two young people are having in the sporting world is really, really something. And so one of the things I love about the breadth, the variety of stories is that I know trans folks who talk about lateral violence, that like within trans stories, there's certain stories that get precedent or count more. And there's shame within the trans community of like, my story isn't the quintessential trans story. And we're seeing here in this book the variety, the nuance, and how variety makes us stronger, diversity makes us stronger, and how how variant our sex is, even how many things go into our sex and our sexual identity. So I think the variety of the story is a really, really beautiful part of the book. And it's so important, you know, we know the danger of that singular story. And I think when we talk about trans athletes, so many folks immediately imagine an elite trans woman. When really we're realizing in this book how many trans athletes are just kids who want to play, or adults who want to play pickup soccer, you know, where the stakes are so low. Why would we ban them from participating and playing? You know, when I really believe play is a human right. And the stat is appalling that when Dr. Baith did the media poll, you can flag every media piece that comes out about trans athletes. Less than 8% name a trans athlete, and then less than 2% quote them. So 98% of the media about trans athletes is talking about them without talking to them. And I think from a writer's perspective even that's important. And so very, very low-hanging fruit of this project was to let the trans athletes tell their own stories and help share those, and then share that there's no one singular story of this. So then whenever we see a universal ban that all ages, all sport, all levels can't play, we should get very, very skeptical of that, because there are nuances and easy ways to create pathways for more folks to be able to engage and play in a way that feels really safe and fair.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, well, one of the myths that you tackle in the book is that trans athletes are coming out in droves, you know, that it's this huge, huge percentage of the sporting world, you know, so what's the reality of those numbers?
Less than 1%. Less than 1% at every age, at every level. In the Olympics, I don't even know what this number is, but you put a 0 point and then 9 zeros, and then a 9% of Olympic athletes have been trans, and they haven't been anywhere close to the medal stand. And so one of the arguments is like, could we just see what happened? Like, could we just see? It's such a small percentage, and because of all these bans, it's less and less safe for trans folks to come out. Because of our culture, it's less and less safe for trans folks to come out. And so it's doing the opposite of them coming in droves. It's like there are folks who might want to play, but it doesn't feel safe to them, and so we're not going to see them play. And I just think everybody loses in that regard. And so the fear, the moral panic that is created, there has to be fear. And for the fear to take hold, there has to be a scarcity mindset. And so the women's sports world is kind of this perfect storm where women have fought so hard for what they have. Not enough has changed since Title IX was passed in '72. And so if you could be more apt to believe the lie that a trans woman is coming to take what you earned, because there's so little already there to grasp. And I see that as a distraction, that the real work is to make sports more equitable for all girls and all women. There's so much work to do. So one of the things that we've been saying is this is a solution in search of a problem. That there's actually trans athletes competing isn't actually a problem. It's being presented as a possible problem, and the bans are the solution for a problem that does not exist. And they're able to kind of churn up votes and power about this thing that isn't actually happening. So how can we not get distracted by that, but focus on the sports world, which definitely needs to get more fair and definitely needs to get more safe, but it's not the trans athletes that are causing the problem. And that's where I get the like double fire in my belly, because not only do I care about these trans kids that want to play, but I also care about us putting our energy toward creating a system that is healthier for everybody, right?
I think one of the things that I appreciate about the book is that you take a really wide lens and you ask questions like, what are sports for? What do we expect sports to do? What do we say that we believe sports do for our children, or for even adults as grown children, like you said? And yeah, what is the discrepancy between legislation like this and the fear that surrounds it. And so, in your own words, what do you think we say sports are for?
Okay, so I go base, that like play as a human right, and I want to work toward a world where more people have the leisure time to play, and that goes to adult play too. I don't think we do enough adult play. I think we take ourselves too seriously, and there are not enough like healthy release valves for us to be exuberant and to be playful, and I go so far as to say, to me, it's very clear that our industrial complex and our capitalism is a constant invitation for us to be disembodied, right? To override our bodies and to live in our minds. We live in a society where the mind is valued higher than the wisdom of the body, and we're being asked to override our bodies that are telling us that we're tired, we're hungry, and to keep pushing toward efficiency and productivity. Our bodies aren't machines. And I see that a disembodied person is easier to control. And so I think sports is one access to stay in my body, to like live as an inhabitant of my body. And there's so much power and wisdom there that's where my freedom resides, and you can't touch it. So I can't be as easily controlled. And I honestly think that's one of the things happening is like, when I got into this project, I got deeper into my body and understood in a deeper way that I was cis. I became more embodied. I became more alive, more liberated. And it was folks who are trans who had done so much thinking about that were like welcoming me into this new stage of exuberance and awakeness and aliveness in my body. And that challenges people, and we try to snuff that out to like soothe our own disembodied selves, right? Instead of looking at that like trans joy as the pathway to a future that really is better for everybody. So I'm pretty invested in sports as one of the many ways, not the only way, but one of the many ways that people can have a sense of belonging, which is a body feel, right? That you can drop the vigilance, your body knows that you're safe. But it's also an access to actual like exuberant play. You know, so I ask readers to like really think about, what's a body memory you have of being like you in your you-ness, like you in your true essence in your body, free. You know, and when was the last time you felt that? And what are your pathways to getting back there? And for me, it was sports. So I talk about like right now in Minneapolis, we're fighting ICE, right? And we're trying to get them out of our city. And I am bringing the body that trained in sports, right? That has endurance and tenacity and focus, and that is able to like be scared but do something anyway, right? So I know that was trained in sports. And I just think about my little kids and how much they love to play. And they love to play with their peers, and they love to compete and see what not only they are capable, but what their team is capable of. And one of the things that makes me really, really sad about our youth sporting system right now is that we're missing the big wins. That it's not just about including trans athletes, but it's about like how the sporting world is going to get better even for cis boys, right? If we can make that a safer culture for all kids to play, and to support them on kind of the lifelong wins instead of like this one basketball game, right? So one of the things I always talk about when we talk about fairness is capitalism. And we want to talk about fairness if it has to do with trans women, but like I actually think it would be fascinating if we made sports free. And then more kids got access to great sporting facilities and coaches. Like I think that would be a huge upheaval in our sporting system where it would become more equitable, more kids could play, and then it gets more interesting.
Now, when this topic is discussed and so much of the conversation surrounds like elite level athletes, but in the book you spend a lot of time talking about children.
Yes.
And what our society misses when we deprive some children from having access to being able to be in their bodies in this way, or to be able to feel like their full selves while pushing the limits of what they're physically capable of. Who do you see as the most at risk in your research? I mean, I have some ideas of what that answer could be, but who has the least access to athletics?
Black and brown kids and families without money. You know, the people who are winning are the people who have always won. And across the board, the people who are winning are, I don't have the numbers memorized, but it's amazing how many athletes who win have two parents who love them. You know, who come from a household of two parents who love them, who have the finances to give them opportunity for good training facilities and coaches. Like, this matters so much more for competitive advantage than what your physique is. You know, when we get to elite athletes like the Olympics, yes, there's a certain level of physique, right? Where you look at a Simone Biles and you're like, your body was made to do gymnastics, right? But gymnastics is so expensive. So it's like this combination of her having a physique that was really strategic for a certain sport, and also having the means to get excellent training when she was very, very young, and then to continue to be able to train instead of work for money, you know. That's where we're making up the fact that trans athletes are a problem. You know, Michael Phelps' body was created to swim, and he has all of these physical advantages that turned into competitive advantage because he had the means for an excellent pool and an excellent coach and the time to train and train and train, right? And we have also boiled it down to testosterone, right? Which is so much more interesting than we think that it is. And we have not, science does not have an answer because we have not prioritized trans bodies, just like we haven't prioritized female bodies. And there's no studies that have studied trans athlete bodies and their testosterone levels as it correlates to their competitive advantage. We have not. What does the science say? We don't know, because if you look at which bodies get studied for information, you will know which bodies our society cares about.
Actually, I marked that part in the book because you say it so well. You're like, you quote Dr. Stacy Sims.
Yeah.
Women are not small men. Sims studies female physiology and how asking female athletes to train as if they are just small, read inferior men does not work. The same logic holds for trans athletes.
That's right.
We compare all bodies to cis male bodies in large part because cis men are the ones who have been studied and tested the most.
That's right. Yeah.
It's so obvious once it's
so obvious.
said. So who benefits from pushing legislation forward when there's when the data isn't there?
The people pushing the policy forward. Like, this is an issue like abortion where policy creators have realized if they say this in a certain way, they will get money and votes. It's very simple, and they know how to do it in a way that elicits that fear. And so that is the lie that we believe. They're coming in droves to harm your daughter. Right? It's like, it's very personal. And it's not reality. And I get really fired up because there are people harming girls.
How many assaults?
Let's stop them first.
How many assaults on female athletes?
Zero. There's zero. It is like zero. This is a solution in search of a problem, right? And one of the things I'm hearing from cis women is like, I don't want to see a penis in the locker room. Okay. So let's explore where that feeling is coming from, and can we that not all penises are the same. Do you know what I'm saying, right? Like, not all humans who have a penis are the same. And when you interview the trans athletes, they are so scared to be in the locker room, right?
The ones who get assaulted.
They are the ones that are getting, so that it just and when you look at how complex sex is, and that we're trying to maintain this strict binary sports system, we're going to have to police the female category because it doesn't match. Our bodies, sex, it doesn't fit a clean two-bucket system. If you're looking, and you can see this through the history of women's sports, of like, how are we going to continue to make sure the women's category is full of women when woman is not as easy of a category as we think that it is. So there was the period of time when we would check external genitalia. And guess whose bodies we were checking, right? It was almost always black and brown bodies, right? Women who were disobedient to the female ideal, more muscular, right? Maybe had just like naturally more of a masculine physique. And that's so invasive. And then you go to the era of chromosome passports where Olympians had to literally have a piece of paper that showed what kind of chromosomes they had. And there's so many variants there that's its own book, right? Of what do intersex athletes do? It doesn't fit. My body doesn't fit into these neat categories, right? And now we're focused on testosterone. When the level of testosterone in your body is less important to your competitive advantage than how the receptors of testosterone in your body work. So I have no idea how much testosterone my body has. There's overlap between cis men and women. Testosterone changes throughout the day, changes throughout your life, and it affects different types of strength. So it's going to work out differently in different bodies in different sports, right? And so it's highly, highly complex. So we keep trying to have this simple way to police that female category, and there isn't a simple way because our bodies are cooler than that. And the bodies that aren't going to fit neatly are going to be the ones that get poked and prodded. And we've seen that throughout history. And so I have a fairly obedient female body. But Florida is talking about menstruation tracking to police the female category. And as a gymnast, I didn't menstruate until, deep into college. So I wouldn't, even as like someone who looks obediently female, I wouldn't have passed that particular test. So this is when we say the in the states where they're supporting trans athletes, cis girls and women are reporting higher rates of participation and also higher rates of happiness participating, because those things are connected. The GOP policymakers are saying we're doing this in the name of protecting girls and women, even though they have no track record of that, even though they can't name female athletes, let alone trans athletes, right? But we're seeing in reality, that's the lie, we're seeing in reality that when you support trans athletes, cis women and girls are thriving too. And I'm going to go so far as to say that cis boys and men are going to thrive as well. So if we cared about the safety, follow me for a second, if we cared about the safety of cis girls and women, and we didn't want trans women to compete against them, we should also be worried about the safety of cis boys and men competing against, or trans boys and men competing against, but we don't care about them, right? So it's like, the logic doesn't flip, right? And so it's very clearly transphobia, and it's working in terms of like power and money in the way that abortion caught as well, right? So cis girls and women need to get a little pissed that we're being used. I don't want you to do this in the name of protecting me. I don't need your protection. I'm doing just fine, thank you. In a way that like protecting the babies in the abortion conversation, right? Yes. Yeah. It's like you can see why that catches. And we want to see how that's catching clearly, and then don't lose sight of the actual work to create a better culture around sports. one of the theories is that just women haven't been given enough time to see what we're capable of. We're not as inferior as people think that we are. Just Title IX hasn't taken yet. Like there's such, I haven't memorized this number, but there's an extremely low number of colleges in the country that are Title IX compliant still, this many years after, right? And so girls and women just haven't been given the same opportunity to show what our bodies can do. And so when they say they're protecting us, it's like, no, just get out of our way. Mm-hmm. we just need more time to thrive. We need more opportunity. Watch us go.
Do you think that there are some sports that would benefit from doing away with the separation of the men's and the women's?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we tell one of the famous stories we tell in the book is the 1992 Barcelona Olympic Games. The clay pigeon shooting used to be mixed. And then a woman won. And then there became separate categories. Oh, and there is clearly no competitive advantage for being a man in clay pigeon shooting. And so that move so clearly was to protect the ego of the men, not to protect the women, right? So that's why we do really need to take it sport by sport. And just because something is simple doesn't mean it's right? And so the universal bans are very simple and clean and neat. That doesn't mean they're right. And I think bodies are more complex, and I think sports are more complex than we're giving them credit for. So we need to let them be as cool and complex as they are. So strength in gymnastics is going to present itself totally different than strength in clay pigeon shooting, right? One of the sports that's really leading the way is ultimate frisbee, and this is interesting to me because it has been decidedly outside of capitalism the whole time. I think about my high school team that started the ultimate frisbee team, and it wasn't within the high school league. They kind of were rogue. They were all the super athletic kids that didn't want to be competing honestly against the jerky jocks, right? Like they wanted to play and feel safe with other cis boys who weren't, I'm being crude, but like weren't alpha, and watching them play was fascinating. And they all, like the culture around ultimate frisbee is like you're roughing yourself, right? It's an honor code. And there's men's ultimate, there's women's ultimate, and there's mixed ultimate. And one of the ultimate players we interview in the book is a trans man who's having a better experience on a women's team that just is like, everybody's welcome. We're just going to be a bunch of bodies playing. Because his experience on the mixed team was during his transition, you'd still line up at the beginning and try to find your match, And so now on the women's team, it's just a bunch of people on the field and just find someone to guard. You're okay, right? And so I do think there's creativity there because it isn't trapped in this hierarchical system of capitalism, and so it can be a little bit more free to write its own rules. And it's the women's teams that are kind of showing that you can be competitive and have fun and be safe and be a bunch of cis and trans people playing together.
And in the book, there's an appendix with pathways to play.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that and some creativity that you mentioned, like creative solutions to this?
Totally. So I'll start with what I think is the simplest, which is recreational adult athletics. There are so many people that are playing extremely low stakes and just are are adults who want to play. So I think about Lennox is in the book. Lennox played D1 soccer on a women's team, and they said that they started playing better when they came out to themselves. They hadn't come out to anybody else yet, but even just that internal alignment, they started performing better, which I think is fascinating. I tend to invite people to think about their favorite athlete and all of the things that make them great. Is it possible, if that athlete is cis, that's one of their advantages because there's an ease in that alignment? Some of these trans athletes who are navigating the cis system, it takes energy to stay safe and to look over your shoulder and withstand harassment that would arguably affect your performance, right? And so they talked about, it was so they started just playing great because they knew who they were and they were playing as them. but it was at the very end of their collegiate career. So now they're playing pickup adult rec soccer, and as a trans non-binary person, like, gets misgendered every Monday night because there's supposed to be 2 women on the field at all times. And so it's this really difficult thing where people are coding them as female. They don't want to be coded as female, but they also want to play, you know? And so because of the numbers on the team, they kind of just go along with it, but they're starting to dread Monday night. And it's like, this is just pickup soccer, folks. You know, do we need to have this be a harmful part of this person's week? Probably not, right? And so then with kids, I really want to focus on giving them this, like, macheting out the space that they need to do the identity formation on their time, right? And so if you're forcing kids to pick a category too soon, it is just so stressful. And so when I taught gender, sex, and sexuality to young people, it's like this period of trying labels on and seeing what fits and seeing what's constricting and seeing what's expansive, and, you know, can we just focus on keeping kids safe and nurtured and supported, and give them places where that they can belong. And again, I just think youth sports is such low stakes that can't we center on their health, their mental health, right? Their health care, get them the health care the health care support that they need. And I also think that we should let all kids play together before puberty for sure, but then as long as possible, because I see what can happen to girls that get socialized to be docile. It's like the longer we can let them just be athletes, it can be a cool corrective as they begin puberty, right? And then with elite athletes, we don't have good information, and we do need to go on a sport by sport basis. Is it a collision sport? Is it a team sport? What type of strength gives you a competitive advantage? And then what are safe ways of creating pathways for these folks to play? So many of these trans women are playing by the rules in terms of, like, having physical hits for having medical transitions, right, where their performance goes down, and they deeply want to play within the rules and compete against cis women in a way that feels fair. But now that they're being banned completely, they don't even have access to do that. So, you know, there are athletes in here who tell the story about, like, sports literally saving their lives. You know, and I just, how is that not what we're focused on?
Yeah. So my last question, what can cis people do to be better allies? What conversations should we be having? What action should we be taking?
Yeah, you know, I think I do, one of the reasons that I believe in packaging this information as a book is because I do think, I'll speak for myself. When I started the process, like, there were a lot of different parts of my identity that I had done a lot of thinking about. I hadn't done a lot of thinking about my cisness. And when we're talking to trans folks, that became abundantly clear to me. And so there can be some shame in that. There can be some discomfort. There's something about a book where you can sit in the comfort of your own home with your favorite blanket and a cup of tea and kind of take the information in as slowly as you want, put it down, take breaks, pick it back up. I do think it's an invitation for cis folks to come out as cis, to think about what sex they were assigned at birth and how they identify, and the ease that alignment has. And that doing that privately can feel safer, right? But like, that's some of the homework that I had to do to be able to do this work with integrity, and then that's when steps became abundantly clear. So I think doing some body work, right? I think calling out transphobia that's misinformed or underinformed, but doing it in a way that's calling folks in to the conversation and getting them access to better information. I love that the book gives you access to 20 stories, but you can also cultivate your social media feeds so you're listening to people who have different body experiences than yours. And then I think a really fun way is to support women's sports. Women's sports is having a moment. It is so dang fun. They're creating such amazing culture, and I do think that one of the things this boils down to is supporting all girls and women, right? And so if we support cis girls and women in women's sports, that is also an entry point to the work of supporting trans folks as well.
Thank you so much. Is there anything I missed that you want to make sure you get to say?
I do. So Chris Mosher wrote the foreword for the book. He's a trans athlete, and he's phenomenal. It took us a whole year to get research approval to interview the youth, which it should have, because to be able to do research, you have to prove you can do it safely, right? And trans kids are very vulnerable. So one of our agreements was that a trans person would interview them. So Chris Mosher interviewed the trans youth. He read the whole book and taught me a lot. You know, he was my sensitivity reader, and he wrote the foreword. He founded a website called transathlete.com, and he is trying to be the adult he needed when he was a kid. And he specializes in policy, and the policy is about to change really fast. There's a few Supreme Court cases that are being decided right now. The Olympics is coming up. It can be really overwhelming. And so I think the last thing I'd say about things these folks can do is follow Chris Mosher and go to transathlete.com a lot to kind of just make sure what we're hearing is not just what's coming out of the media.
That's good advice.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank